"We didn't steal," cried Frances suddenly. "We didn't! We didn't!" "That's enough from you, missy," said her nurse. "Come straight out of there. You have nothing to do with this." "Oh, I don't know," said Janet, with a hard stare at Frances's nurse. "He never did such a thing before by himself." "Come on," said the nurse to Frances. "This is no place for you." She held Frances by the wrist and started walking away so fast Frances had to run to keep up. "Nobody can call us thieves and get by with it." "You don't have to steal, even if others do," old Janet said to Stephen in a high, carrying voice. "If you so much as pick up a lemon in somebody else's house, you're a little thief." She lowered her voice and said, "Now I'm going to tell your grandma, and you'll see what you get." "He went to the ice box and left it open," Janet told Grandma, "and he got into the lump sugar and spilt it all over the floor, lumps everywhere underfoot. He dribbled water all over the clean kitchen floor, and he baptized the rosebush, blaspheming, and he took your spode teapot." "I didn't either," said Stephen loudly, trying to free his hand from old Janet's big, hard fist. "Don't tell fibs," said old Janet. "That's the last straw." "Oh, dear," said Grandma, "he's not a baby any more." She shut the book she was reading and pulled the wet front of his pullover toward her. "What's this sticky stuff on him?" she asked, and straightened her glasses. "Lemonade," said old Janet. "He took the last lemon." They were in the big dark room with the red curtains. Uncle David walked in from the room with the bookcases, holding a box in his uplifted hand. "Look here," he said to Stephen. "What's become of all my balloons?" Stephen knew well that Uncle David was not really asking a question. Stephen, sitting on a footstool at his grandma's knee, felt sleepy. He leaned heavily and wished he could put his head on her lap. But he might go to sleep, and it would be wrong to go to sleep while Uncle David was still talking. Uncle David walked about the room with his hands in his pockets, talking to Grandma. Now and then he would walk over to a lamp and, leaning, peer into the top of the shade, winking in the light, as if he expected to find something there. "It's simply in the blood, I told her," said Uncle David. "I told her she would simply have to come and get him and keep him. She asked me if I meant to call him a thief, and I said if she could think of the more exact word, I'd be glad to hear it." "You shouldn't have said that," commented Grandma calmly. "Why not? She might as well know the facts. I suppose he can't help it," said David, stopping now in front of Stephen and dropping his chin to his collar. "I shouldn't expect too much of him, but you can't begin too early." "The trouble is," said Grandma, and while she spoke she took Stephen by the chin and held it up so that he had to meet her eye, and she talked steadily in a mournful tone, but Stephen could not understand. She ended, "It's not just about the balloons, of course." "It's about the balloons," said David angrily, "because balloons now mean something worse later. Balloons now mean something worse later. But what can you expect? It's his father. Well, it's in the blood. That's your sister's husband you're talking about," said Grandma, "and there's no use making things worse. Besides, you don't really know." "I do know," said Uncle David, and he talked again very fast, walking up and down. Stephen tried to understand, but the sounds were strange and floating just over his head. They were talking about his father, and they did not like him. Uncle David came over and stood above Stephen and Grandma. He hunched over them with a frowning face, a long, crooked shadow from him falling across them to the wall. To Stephen he looked like his father, and he shrank against his grandmother's skirts. "The question is, what to do with him now?" asked Uncle David. "If we keep him here, he'd just be I won't be bothered with him. He's too far gone already, I'm afraid. No training, no example." "You're right. They must take him and keep him," said Grandma. She ran her hands over Stephen's head. Tenderly she pinched the nape of his neck between thumb and forefinger. "You're your grandma's darling," she told him, "and you've had a nice long visit, and now you're going home. Mama is coming for you in a few minutes. Won't that be nice?" "I want my mama," said Stephen, whimpering, for his grandma's face frightened him. There was something wrong with her smile. Oppressed and distressed by his caretaker's angry, principled attempts to improve his flawed moral character, the little boy struggles to defend himself. He's defending himself against the emotional onslaught in which he knows he's unsafe. His mother arrives, argues bitterly with her brother David, and attempts through false cheer and bravado to protect her son. As the story ends, Stephen demonstrates the perversely logical strategy employed by oppressed small human beings throughout history to protect themselves against torturers of all sorts. He uses imitation. "Come on, Stephen, darling," said Mamma. "It's far past his bedtime," she said to no one in particular. "Imagine keeping a baby up to torture him about a few miserable little bits of colored rubber." She smiled at Uncle David with both rows of teeth as she passed him on the way to the door, keeping between him and Stephen. "Ah, where would we be without high moral standards?" she said, and then to Grandma, "Good night, Mother," in quite her usual voice. "I'll see you in a day or so." "Yes, indeed," said Grandma cheerfully, coming out to the hall with Stephen and Mamma. "Let me hear from you. Ring me up tomorrow. I hope you'll be feeling better." "I feel very well now," said Mamma, brightly, laughing. She bent down and kissed Stephen. "Sleepy, darling? Papa's waiting to see you. Don't go to sleep until you've kissed your papa good night." Stephen woke with a sharp jerk. He raised his head and put out his chin a little. "I don't want to go home," he said. "I want to go to school. I don't want to see Papa. I don't like him." Mamma laid her palm over his mouth softly. "Darling, don't." Uncle David put his head out with a kind of snort. "There you are," he said. "There you've got a statement from headquarters." Mamma opened the door and ran, almost carrying Stephen. She ran across the sidewalk, jerking open the car door and dragging Stephen in after her. She spun the car around and dashed forward so sharply Stephen was almost flung off the seat. He sat braced, then with all of his might, hands digging into the cushions. The car speeded up and the trees and houses whizzed by, all flattened out. Stephen began suddenly to sing to himself, a quiet, inside song, so Mamma would not hear. He sang his new secret. It was a comfortable, sleepy song. "I hate Papa, I hate Mama, I hate Grandma, I hate Uncle David, I hate old Janet, I hate Marjorie, I hate Papa, I hate Mama." His head bobbed, leaned, came to rest on Mamma's knee, eyes closed. Mamma drew him closer and slowed down, driving with one hand. Oppression, masked as concern, provokes in the child a response of hatred, severing of communication, and withdrawal from relationship with those closest to him. Withdrawal into a secret life. This is a typical stage in a child's training for survival in the adult world, and a step toward the diminishment of aliveness. After being loved, and then being surprised with hurt and being blamed, Stephen learned to blame. Stephen blamed his uncle, his grandmother, old Janet, Marjorie, for torturing him in his mistakes. Torturing him for his mistakes, which were natural, venturesome initiatives on his part, and for his apparent resemblance to his parents, whom he also hates for being the original causes of disgust for him and the other adults. He's learning to have good causes for hatred, just like they do. He's learning to be like them in order to survive among them. The downward path to wisdom is about all of us. When Stephen started singing his little hate song, it was a metaphor for the hate songs we've all learned. Our liberation from the hatred and isolation of the mental jail that we, like Stephen, began constructing in childhood depends on our willingness to knock down the walls and resume relationships to other people. We have to start relationships with other people over again, reaching beyond that wall. When we do this, we invite the reawakening of all the pain and shock of the original wounds inflicted on us in our innocence, against which we defended ourselves with the resolve to hate. Telling the truth, after hiding out for a long time, reopens old wounds that didn't heal properly. It often hurts a lot. It takes guts. It isn't easy. It's better than the alternative. Chapter 4. Levels of Telling the Truth. Oh, but I was so much older then. I'm younger than that now. Bob Dylan. Kathleen was 35 years old and head of her own interior decorating business, hard-working, confident, pretty, and bright, a survivor. Her business was going great, and she was getting rich. She came to me because, in spite of the appearance of great success, she was hypertensive, unable to have orgasms, suffering from insomnia, frenetic about work, and depressed about not having any intimate relationships with men. She came from a large Catholic family. She had been stuck in early adolescence for years and was destined to stay there for the remainder of her life, as many parochial school students do, having learned from the nuns that the most important thing in life was to put on an act for the parents and overseers, and to live your real life on the side and in secret. You have a public life and a secret life. Keep it that way. 8 years earlier, Kathleen had gotten an abortion, hiding it from her pro-life Catholic family. She had told no one about it except the man who impregnated her, and she had soon broken up with him. She had guarded her secret well through 2 years of individual psychotherapy with another therapist, and many intensive groups where there had been opportunities for telling the truth. First she told me, then she told members of a therapy group, then she told her friends, then she told her sister. Each increment of revelation brought a degree of self-forgiveness and freedom. Each increment of lightening up about her dark secret helped quite a bit, but it wasn't enough. I encouraged her to finish with the matter by telling the truth to her parents. She resisted for some time, and finally I told her she had to either do it or get out of therapy. She agreed to tell them. She made several trips home with the intention of having a completely honest conversation with her folks, but she'd get scared and come back without having spoken a word. The first thing her father said when she finally came out with it was, "Oh, thank God," because he and her mother had already secretly concluded that Kathleen probably had a terminal disease she couldn't bring herself to tell them about. After the topic was broached and a discussion ensued about why Kathleen and all the other children lied to them all the time, the brother who was in town was called over, and the family had quite a long discussion about who everyone was, about lying, and about the games the kids had played with the parents, and the secrets they'd kept among themselves. This conversation with her family was a breakthrough for her psychotherapy. Kathleen no longer has asthma. A few months after that trip home, she began living with a man to whom she is now married and has children. She has orgasms almost every time they have sex. She can sleep. She runs her business and takes time off as she likes. She's even more successful, but not miserable anymore. She has accomplished the first level of telling the truth. Kathleen stepped out from behind her good daughter role, which she had maintained by hiding and lying all the time, risked her relationship to her parents for the sake of revealing who she was, and ended up transforming not only her own way of being in the world, but that of her whole family. Roles are like clothing we learn to put on, to protect ourselves from the cold. When we take off the roles we've been hiding behind, the naked being we are stands there, vulnerable and defenseless. The being we are, as distinct from the roles we've been playing, doesn't need the defensive weapons we invented to scare the enemy away. Those other people out there are naked under their roles too. They are playing possum, or creating a stink, or baring their fangs and growling, or signaling anger and threatening like a chimp, or running like a rabbit. Their roles were developed for the sake of survival, just as our roles were. The difference between our survival tactics and those of animals is that theirs are necessary for the continuation of their physical existence, and ours are not. But we act as though ours were. We conceal ourselves because we fear that the pain accompanying the act of self-disclosure will literally destroy us, or fundamentally damage our being in some horrible way, rendering us maimed and dysfunctional. In addition, we fear we may destroy others with our truth-telling. Kathleen recoiled for years from what she saw as the utterly destructive power of her unleashed secret. It would, she thought, kill her parents and herself to have it told. But telling the truth kills nothing but false roles, images, interpretations, and lies, as Kathleen discovered. It only kills those deceits which we've kept alive through strategic self-concealment. Kathleen, her false image, did not survive her revelation. But Kathleen, the being she was, literally did. Through telling the truth, she revealed herself, and thus delivered herself and her family into a new and more powerful relationship, achieved through the death of the old lying relationship. The ability to get naked in front of other people who are still in their roles, as Kathleen did, is important. Coming out from behind our roles permits us to look behind the roles of others, because we can see more clearly the threat of other people posing in their roles fades. Once we come out from behind our pose, what used to scare us about other people doesn't scare us anymore. Coming off it, dropping the roles we thought we needed for protection, turns out to be not only safe, but a place of power. Kathleen got less scared of other people, particularly men. Intimacy is a power grown into after adolescence. The person capable of intimacy, that is, the person capable of telling the truth, still has roles to play, but is no longer trapped in them. The integrated person behind the role no longer has anything to hide, and can relate freely to the being he knows is hidden behind the roles other people are playing. The person is then in charge, rather than the role. I differentiate three phases or levels of telling the truth. These levels may occur successively or simultaneously, or a person may master one or two levels and then retreat from the next. Often people retreat after encountering the frightening sense of freedom afforded by a breakthrough to a new level. Sometimes they try again later, and sometimes they don't. The three levels are: 1. Revealing the facts. 2. Honestly expressing current feelings and thoughts. And 3. Exposing the fiction you've devised to represent yourself and your history on purpose. Level 1. Revealing the facts. Kathleen is an example of level 1 of telling the truth. The first level of telling the truth is to reveal the facts. It's a matter of clearing up lies from the past and the false presentation of self being maintained through withholding. We all lie casually and habitually and are largely unconscious about it. We all learn to lie innocently as we learn the ways of being grown up and how to impress our friends. We have to develop and organize the lies we pretend to be, and to complete that job and to feel okay about it before we can give up that identity. We have to strut and pose and try on lots of roles and tell a lot of lies and do a good job of it before giving it up. But if we continue to grow, we will give the roles up. Eventually we can joke about what used to be serious work on learning how to represent ourselves to others. That ability to joke about who we are comes only after we've developed the basic identity, the fundamental lie that we think we are. Then, despite all that work, we have to give up our attachment to that identity. If we don't, we'll never be free from its restrictions. Here's another way of saying it. We have to go through adolescence and develop an identity and answer the question, who am I? Having established that identity, we have to give up our attachment to it and remember who we were at the beginning before we developed that identity. who we still are, the being from back in the womb, and who we have come to know ourselves as, the identity we have developed, have to be integrated. Then when we relate to other people, we can come from a consciousness of our whole being and of the being of others, and have a personality rather than be had by our personality. The first level of this process is revealing deceptions and withholds. You've been maintaining an image in the eyes of others to sell yourself to them in a certain way. Now you have to untell those lies. If you never have told your mother and father that you stole the car at 1 a.m. to visit your boyfriend when you were 16, go tell them and face the consequences even if you're 40. It must be done. Not everyone's up to it. Take, for example, Linda, who illustrates a retreat from this first level of telling the truth. Linda is a 37-year-old woman raised in the Midwest in a middle-class Protestant home. All of her life, the point of living has been to be a good girl, to be good and not bad, to score points, to be a star in high school and college, to make A's, and to be well thought of. She was a cheerleader and a member of all the important clubs in high school and college. She is very successful and makes a lot of money and is highly regarded in her profession. She's at the end of her second marriage. She's had affairs and gotten caught by her husband in both cases, and the eventual result has been one divorce and one imminent divorce. She says that as far as her father, whom she adores, is concerned, she's still a virgin. She wouldn't dream of telling him of the 3 furtive one-night stands she had with virtual strangers, and the one affair that was more than a one-night stand that occurred before her first divorce. She didn't even tell her second husband about that. Neither would she dream of telling Daddy about the 3 one-night stands and 2 long-term affairs she's had since about 2 years after her second marriage began, including the one in which her husband had caught her. She had a whole stack of compiled secrets and unfinished business with her father, her first husband, and her current husband. With my encouragement, she told her husband everything about all her affairs, including the ones since they were married. However, when he didn't get over the news within a month, she started withholding from him again about conversations and meetings she was having with her current male friend. After all, since she doesn't have sex with her friend anymore, there's no need to bring it up, right? She and her husband don't have sex anymore. She's repulsed by the idea of sex with her husband, but she doesn't want to tell him that because it might hurt his feelings, and she sees no need to do that again. She does meet and have a drink now and then with her former lover, who doesn't tell her husband, and she doesn't tell her husband. She feels virtuous for not having sex with her former lover when she talks to him, and for trying to work out her marriage. She can't understand why in the world I suggest that she clean up her act with her husband again, and go and tell her parents everything. It would only hurt and disappoint her father, who is old now and wouldn't understand. She admits that since she told her husband about her previous secret sex life, they've had the best conversations they've ever had. But since he still seems to be deciding to divorce her, she's not sure she believes in this stuff called telling the truth. Linda has plenty of reasons and plenty of social support from her friends to continue to gossip with them and withhold from her husband and not tell her folks about her life. And for God's sake to quit seeing that ridiculous psychologist who's obviously crazy. She's quite pretty and takes good care of her body, even though she suffers from pain caused by being so uptight. She had twice been misdiagnosed as having arthritis before coming to see me, but had flunked the blood test taken to confirm the diagnosis and confounded several doctors' attempts to figure out what caused her so much pain. She saw no relationship whatsoever between her withholding at the social level and holding back at the physical level to such a degree that all of her joints ached. She did notice, however, that when she cleaned up her withholds with her husband and risked her phony marriage, her pain went away. She got stuck between the rock of going back to the controlled misery of her previous arrangement and salvaging her marriage, and the hard place of recreating a new marriage based on telling the truth. Worse yet, after starting to hide again from her husband, the damn pain had started coming back. My suggestion that she go tell her father the whole story just added to her stress, and she started considering finding a more understanding therapist. Because she's so pretty, there are lots of other men out there who are much more understanding than I am anyway, particularly since being understanding is a good way to get laid. From her point of view, she's tried telling the truth at level 1, the facts, and it didn't work because her husband got mad and didn't get over it. So she's not going to make the same mistake with her father or with her husband again. When she reached this conclusion, I suggested that she quit therapy with me. She didn't want to. I set the condition that she tell the truth to her husband and parents at this first level or else get out of therapy. She got out, still suffering from the stress and physical pain that had brought her to me. I recommend that people tell the truth because stress is caused by lying. Some people are too scared to follow through, and others temporarily tell the truth and then go back to lying. If I attempt to do therapy with people who are not willing to take the risk of telling the truth, I'm ripping them off. I put up with their withholding and lying for a while and support them to experiment enough to see how it works. About 1 out of 6 people leave therapy with me by quitting or getting kicked out. Sometimes kicking someone out of therapy is an effective therapeutic intervention.